As I begin to sew, I need to find the right side and the wrong side of the work. This is the wrong side. It looks like plain ribbing. The right side has this puffy English rib look, so I want to have the right sides up. I also want to make sure that I have the top of the knitted piece, and it's the bind off I just did, not the circular bind off. I have the back and front face up, and I've matched the shoulder right here. I'm going to go ahead and thread a needle and start over at the shoulder, and I just start by coming under on the opposite side, and then I work my way along by going in and out of the next cast off stitch, in and out on the opposite side, in and out, and I sew it up in that fashion until I have sewed up about 2 inches from the edge toward the center of the neck. That just sews the shoulders in. Now that the 2 shoulders are in, I need to put in a sleeve. I folded the sleeve to find the center, and then I've taken a basting stitch with contrasting yarn to match the center of that sleeve to the shoulder seam. I've also used the marker that I had hanging from the back to baste the corner of the sleeve to that spot on the back. And then for this other spot, I know where it matches because the place where the light pink begins is where the edge of the sleeve goes. So now I'll begin to sew that sleeve into the armhole. Now just a quick check to make sure I have the right side facing on these 3 pieces, the back, the front, and the sleeve. And I'm using an end of the yarn that was hanging from the corner of the sleeve to get myself started. I want to sew using the dent outside the last tucked stitch. I've got a straight line here, and as long as I stay in the straight line, the sewing's going to look just terrific. So I use that. Those are going to be my stitches for mattress stitching along this edge of the yoke. Then on the sleeve, I'm going to go in and pick up the cast-off stitches, and I'll have to estimate how many stitches to take for each one of these yoke stitches. But I go in where I came out on the yoke, then on the sleeve I go in where I came out and I pick up another stitch, back over to the yoke, in where I came out. Now with the right sides facing me, I can see exactly what I'm doing, and I can get a nice looking seam, because after all, finishing is what really shows when people look at your work. So I'll continue to mattress stitch this up to the shoulder, adjusting so that I'm sure that I don't end up with too much left at one side or the other. Here's a close-up of that seam between the sleeve and the yoke. When you sew up the body pieces, begin by matching the 2 ribbings. Now the right sides are up here again, and I'm just going to go through the loop at the very edge of the ribbing, and then I like to go through the loop at this edge. I actually do that twice. That way that matches exactly. Then I just mattress stitch and make sure that I'm in the same straight line on each side. Every time I go in this side, I'm going to make sure that I'm in the same groove, because with ribbing I've got very prominent straight lines that I can follow. And I'll simply mattress stitch my way up. I'll come up the ribbing on the bottom of the pieces and then work my way up the side seams. So that's how I'll do the sleeve and the body when I put in all of those seams. Then I'll hide my ends and I'll have a finished sweater. Now this sweater can also be made on a bulky machine. It's made with sport weight yarn, which is a little bit thick for the standard machine, a little bit on the thin side for the bulky machine. So the difference is, on the standard machine, you did 1 by 1 ribbing. On the bulky machine, you are going to do full needle rib. So I have all these needles in work on the ribber, and 1 more needle in work on the main bed. And when you add up the total number of needles to use, remember you have to add the ones that are on the ribber. So half of the needles minus 1 are on the ribber. I still want the end needle to be on the main bed, so if you have to adjust by 1 to get that, then you should do that. The sweater is otherwise the same process. There is only one difference in the technique, and I'm going to show that at the end of one of the pattern pieces of the sweater. It is a different bind-off. When I get to the cast-off on any of the pieces done with the bulky machine, doesn't matter which piece I'm knitting, if I'm still in English rib because I'm doing the sleeve, I want to get this to plain. And you follow your manual settings to get this to not tuck anymore to the left. In my case, I move this lever down and this slide back to the left. I also want to do my 1 loose row, so I'm going to loosen this way up. I think I'll do tension 8 on both beds, and then I knit my 1 loose row. I'm going to clip the yarn now and tie on some waste yarn, because I can't do the cast off on the machine and be able to cast off every individual stitch the way I would prefer. I want a nice stretchy cast off, because after all, this has to go over somebody's head. So I'm going to cast off away from the machine using a loop through a loop bind off, but preserving the ability to cast off every single stitch. So what I do is I tie on, and using a latch tool I pull through a contrasting color of waste yarn. I put both carriages back on the garment tension because I had loosened them up for that last row, and to get 10 rounds of circular knitting I need to do 20 rows. I'm going to switch this to the circular setting, which is the top slide here and the left part button on the main carriage, and then do my 20 rows circular and take it off. Here I am ready to bind off this edge away from the machine. So my first little thing is to figure out which end to start with. This end doesn't have the strings, so I'm going to start here. This other end, which has the string, is where I'm going to finish. So I start here, and the stitch I begin with is the very edge-most stitch. So I'm just going to fold this down and insert the latch tool in that very end stitch. And then by looking at where the yarn goes, I can see where the second stitch is, pull it through the first, then I go across to the opposite side, pick up a stitch and pull through, cross, pull through, cross, pull through, and I do this the entire length of this edge that I need to cast off, and then I'll remove the waste yarn and show you the edge that I got. This is the same cast off, but I couldn't do it on the machine because with full needle rib I had too many stitches to transfer up to the main bed. So this is my preferred way of getting that done. Now, there's a reason that I did this. It was so that it would be stretchy enough. If you use some kind of bind off where you double the stitches to move them to the main bed and double them up and then bind off, I think you may not have enough stretchiness for a sweater where this has to go over the head. So you can see that I've got it in my lap, and I've just got it folded over loosely, and it doesn't pull in any more at the neck than the rest of the garment, which is exactly what I wanted with this bind off. So those are the modifications that you need to do to follow the bulky machine instructions.